Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our Memorial Day services for 2018 this year. At this point, I would like to introduce our junior ROTC here. This is our American Legion chaplain, Mr. Clint Wheeler, come in for a prayer.
Good morning. Please uncover. Almighty God, we thank you for this Memorial Day. We thank you for these people who are here to celebrate the lives of those who have passed in the effort to give us the freedoms that we enjoy. We thank you for the lives of the fallen and ask that your blessing be upon them. Bless and comfort the families and the friends of those who have paid the supreme sacrifice for us all. In the name of the Lord, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this point, I would like to introduce our recognition of our honored guests, which we have quite a bit here today. You guys can all be seated now at this point. Just real quick before we come up and they speak, I would like to introduce Congresswoman Maxine Waters for coming here today. Our State Senator, Stephen Bradford. Assemblywoman Autumn Burke. Director of LA Resources, Jason Young. Our Hawthorne City Council members, Angie Reyes English, Nilo Michelin, Olivia Valentine, and our very own Hawthorne Mayor, Alex Vargas. And also here joining us today is Don Deere, Director of West Basin Water District. Now, we have a Memorial Day delivery of our wreaths at this point. Gil from our SALs, from American Legion Post 314, will you please present the wreaths? And the wreath that was brought up, our second wreath, was presented by our VFW Ladies Auxiliary President, Christine Bloomberg. Okay, and now we're going to have our reading of our deceased members this year from our posts, VFW and the American Legion.
Those that have transferred to Post Everlasting from American Legion, Post 314. Barry Kasich. Alfred Burke.
No response.
John Francisco.
No response.
Arturo Castro.
No response.
William Schultz.
No response.
For the readings of the VFW, I would like to introduce the chaplain, Mr. Al Collins.
Before I read these names, I want to tell you a quick little story. I'll make it as quick as I can. 95-year-old World War II veteran. Knock on his door, doesn't answer. Ring the bell, knock and ring, doesn't answer. I get to my car, and there he is on the porch. And he apologizes because he's 95 years old. He's an Army paratrooper. And he apologized that his knees are so bad he could hardly make it to the door. And he says to me after I introduce myself, "Do you believe in miracles?" I says, "Yes. My commander-in-chief sits on the throne." And he says, "Good, let me tell you one. I got dropped behind enemy lines in Burma. We struggled through the jungles for 4 days, ran out of food. Couldn't see 3 feet in front of us because the mist and fog was so thick in the valley. And we prayed that the plane would come and drop supplies. All we could do was listen for the sound of the drop because we couldn't see more than 3 or 5 feet in front of us. All of a sudden, they got to a little clearing, and it started to open up. They saw the plane, shot the flare, they dropped the load. The guys ran to the load. The minute they got to the load, they were covered by the mist and protected. God is with us this day as I read these names. Kenneth W. Barnett.
No response.
Danny W. Blumberg.
No response.
Hugo Boisset.
No response.
Thomas Cast.
No response.
Henry Chu.
No response.
Raymond Glenn Clannon.
No response.
Edward Denning Jr.
No response.
Robin Ennis.
No response.
William Fogarty.
No response.
Bernard Friesmuth.
No response.
Roger Gonzalez.
No response.
Barton Graves.
No response.
Ernest Hoover.
No response.
Robert Katrib.
No response.
Gunter Klein.
No response.
Harry Cullenmeyer.
No response.
David Lucero.
No response.
John McGillivatty.
No response.
Edward Maskowitz.
No response.
Gilbert McElroy.
No response.
Roy McInnes.
No response.
Joseph Miles.
No response.
Jose Mejia.
No response.
Maurice Mosley.
No response.
Fritz Neiman.
No response.
Gerald Nibel.
No response.
Henry Nishi.
No response.
Robert Nordley.
No response.
Leon Patterson.
No response.
Frank Pontillo.
No response.
John Ritchie.
No response.
Louis Bracco.
No response.
Donald Smith.
No response.
James Sullivan.
No response.
Rosendo Vasquez.
No response.
Jack Weaver.
No response.
and Donald Welch. Thank you, Lord. Forgive me.
You know, after hearing all those names of our service members that have passed on and left a legacy for our young men and women to follow, we always have to remember, too, the ones that are serving now, the ones that are overseas, the ones that aren't coming home, their families that are suffering, grieving for a loss of their child, their loved one. These service members that gave their life for our country, and that was their job, was to serve. But it's our job to remember today what they've done and what they went through to serve for us, to be the nation that we are at this point in our lives. These young men and women, I couldn't be prouder of all of them. You guys are doing a great job. And it just hits home when you hear all these names. All right, let's get back to the program here. At this point, we're going to have 3 rifle volleys. The Naval Junior ROTC team, please. Taps. As I was speaking and I was looking at the young men and women, I kind of jumped forward a little bit on our program, and I apologize for that, but we still have a great Memorial Day program ahead of us. As I introduced our recognition of honored guests, I still would like for everyone to come up and say what they want to say, because it's important that we hear from our senators, we hear from the people that are fighting for us in looking better for our veterans. And I would just like to start with probably one of the most vocal person I've known as far as speaking on veterans and speaking on communal issues. I have a lot of respect for Congresswoman Miss Maxine Waters.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let us begin by taking a moment to thank our ROTC of Hawthorne High School. Give them a big round of applause. I'd like to acknowledge Hawthorne American Legion Post 314, Commander Greg Farstyle, and the officers of Post 314, Auxiliary President Gene Cooley, and the Sons of the American Legion Commander Gil Demolus. Hawthorne VFW Post 275, Commander Roger Morrissey, and the officers of Post 275, Auxiliary President Christine Blumberg, Mayor Vargas, City Council members, other city elected officials, special guests, ladies and gentlemen of Hawthorne. A big round of applause for all. Ladies and gentlemen, it is always a great honor for me to be here with you, especially on a day when we take time to honor and remember the brave military service members who paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our great nation. Today, the nation observes Memorial Day. Since the very beginning of the United States of America, patriotic men and women have stepped forward to serve in our military because they believe in the ideals these United States stand for: peace, liberty, freedom, and justice for all. Many of those patriots who stepped forward sacrificed their lives for all of us in our country. On Memorial Day, we pay homage to their sacrifice. Today serves as a solemn reminder that our security and liberty are possible because of the men and women in uniform spanning every generation since the Revolutionary War. Memorial Day has its roots in Decoration Day, a day when Union Civil War veterans honored the soldiers who had died in conflict. To help heal from the tragedy of the Civil War, Americans across the country decorated the graves of veterans with flowers to symbolize the renewal of life. This tradition of unity, life, and remembrance continued for decades, and in 1968, Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. Since then, Memorial Day has been observed on the last Monday in May. As you might suspect, Californians are well represented among those brave men and women who have served in the military. Our state is home to nearly 2 million veterans from diverse backgrounds, more than any other state in the country. As a representative of the 43rd District of California in the United States Congress, I am forever committed to the brave men and women who put on the uniform of our great country and volunteered to protect our liberties and our way of life. The residents of this community and this state deserve the opportunity to say thank you to some of the bravest Americans who have ever lived, and remember those that may have lost. This is why I worked for 2 years to bring the Vietnam Veterans Memorial replica, which travels across the country as part of the Wall That Heals exhibit to the South Bay, so we could pay tribute and respects to those we lost during the Vietnam War. With the help of the city of Gardena, this memorial traveled to California this past April and was visited by thousands who paid their respects to those military service members we have lost. To truly honor the more than 1.1 million Americans who have passed away in the line of duty since the Revolutionary War, we must do right by their brothers and sisters in arms and support the veterans who return home. This is why I've introduced the Ensuring Quality Education for Veterans Act, which would close a loophole and remove the existing incentive many for-profit colleges have to take advantage of veteran students. Last fall, I also introduced the Protecting Benefits for Disabled Veterans Act, which protects benefits for veterans who are unable to work due to a service-connected disability. Now, I'm not the only member of Congress working on behalf of veterans. Members of Congress from both sides of the aisle have worked together and introduced dozens of bills so far in 2018 that modernize the VA, improve access to quality health care, protect benefits for veterans and their families, and expand economic security. Supporting our veterans and service members must be a bipartisan goal that ensures we treat them and their family members with dignity and respect they deserve. As we progress as a nation, we must work together to provide more opportunities for our returning veterans and their families. So in closing, ladies and gentlemen, take the time, not just on this special holiday, but every day, to remember, appreciate, and give thanks to the sacrifices made by our fallen soldiers. For those who did not come home from the battlefields, we must honor their memories and their sacrifice and their families' sacrifice. To the families who have lost a loved one in the line of duty, No amount of words can ever begin to ease the pain of losing a son or daughter, a brother, a sister, a father, or mother. We will forever be thankful for their service and sacrifice, and we will forever mourn alongside you. Thank you for inviting me to join you all today in honoring our fallen soldiers. Thank you to all of our military personnel and families with us this morning for your great sacrifice. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Ms. Maxine Waters, that was, as always, you show up. We appreciate looking at you, and thank you for all the hard work you put in. And then I would like to recognize our state senator, Mr. Stephen Bradford. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. It is truly an honor to be in Hawthorne and join the City Council and the Veterans of Foreign War in Hawthorne Post 2075, as well as the American Legion Hawthorne Post 314, and taking a moment to recognize, but not just recognize, but say thank you to the men and women who have put on the uniform in defense of freedoms here in this country. When I think about the sacrifices that they made, that sacrifice was not about a flag, but about the principles in which that flag represents. The principles of freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to love, freedom of speech, and even this freedom of protest, even if that protest means taking a knee. That's what these men and women have fought for. That's what this flag represents. That's what this nation represents. I'm honored to join Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's on the battlefront every day on behalf of not only this community, this state, this nation, and making sure that we are treated fair and just in Washington, D.C., to the local city council people, to my colleague on the other side of the House, Assemblywoman Autumn Burke, who is truly a fighter and a champion for all those things that matter most to each and every one of us here today. So again, on behalf of the 35th Senate District, I'm honored to be here, and again, to not only recognize, but say thank you to the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice, but also for those of you who made it a priority today to come out and recognize and remember. Because the day is not about just a day off. It's not about a barbecue or a basketball game. It's about remembering the sacrifice and the contributions that the men and women of this country have made and will continue to make. So thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, State Senator, Mr. Bradford. At this point, I'd like to introduce our Assemblywoman, Mrs. Autumn Burke.
Good morning. I'd like to thank my colleagues again, Congresswoman Waters and Senator Bradford, as well as the Mayor and the City Council for having us here today. Today we remember the men and women who gave their lives to provide a free and democratic society. Our freedoms are so tied to our identities as Americans that we sometimes take them for granted, but not today. Today we recognize that only because of our veterans do we have a country where free and fair elections determine our leaders. Citizens with vastly different views can speak out for the things that they believe in without fear of retribution. We have the right to pray, and we have the right to protest, while a free press holds our leaders accountable. America has always remained united around our uncompromising values, that freedom, equality belong to all Americans, no matter our religion, race, age, gender, sexuality, or how we talk or what we wear. It is a country where we recognize the equal contributions and competence of women, as well as people of color and immigrants. A country where you can worship the God of your own understanding and marry the person you love, regardless of gender. Where women have the freedom to decide what to do with their own bodies, and all men have the freedom to peacefully protest injustice rather than resort to violence. Days like today remind us ourselves of the dream and promise of the American democracy. a promise that many died to fulfill. Our democracy is fragile. So today, on this Memorial Day, where people have fought and died so we may have many of the freedoms to choose our own leaders, there's no better way to honor our fallen veterans than to exercise our greatest freedom, the right to vote. June 5th isn't just another primary in California. There has never been a more important time for you to get involved in what is happening and to fight for equality and justice, for those to have a voice and for the voiceless to have opportunities that where none others would. This is what our veterans fought for, and it is our responsibility to protect and participate in the democracy that they died for. Thank you for including me today, and have a wonderful Memorial Day.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Autumn Burke. Very elegantly put. At this point, I would like to introduce our own Mayor of Hawthorne, Mr. Alex Vargas. Oh, no, you're coming up.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here, and thank you to all the elected officials from the state government, federal government for being here. Just want to say that we are memorializing the veterans who have passed away in the previous wars, but I do want to bring attention to the fact that there are still people in the current theater of operations that are passing away up to this day. And we need to remember that there's things that are going on at this moment. So it's commendable, and I just don't imagine myself having the courage that the veterans, you who serve, and those who have passed away have just put their lives out there for our freedoms. As was mentioned previously by the senator, the freedoms to basically, to follow whatever religion we want, the freedoms to speak freely, to criticize. Of course, the consequences are a different question, right, for expressing yourself. And the freedom to protest. Those are really important. To disagree or agree with your own government, your own state government, your own municipal government, county government, federal government. Those are important freedoms that if we look at, we wonder, why is there a question on immigration right now? It's because these people from all these other countries are wanting to come to the United States because they see the freedoms that we have. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that people want to jump the borders or cross here however they can. It's because they see this flag and see what it symbolizes, the liberties that we have. They don't have this in any other part of the country, no matter how modern a country you see out there. Europe even. Europeans are immigrating to this country. Latinos are immigrating to this country. Asians are immigrating to this country. So it shouldn't surprise us that we live in the best country in the world, and that's thanks to the veterans who have served and have been able to survive, and those who have passed away and given the ultimate sacrifice. So let's keep all our veterans and those who have passed in our prayers.
Thank you, Mayor. Going down here, my distinguished guests, I know we have, I have one more here that it's an honor for me to introduce. I hold this man very close and dear to my heart. He's made a big impact in my life. He's made a big impact in veterans' lives out here, I'm sure a lot of them that go here to the Gardena Vet Center. This man that I'm talking about here has spearheaded programs before the VA even knew what PTSD was. This gentleman brought light to PTSD. He brought light so Vietnam veterans can go get help for what they're doing, and he continues the fight through the VA, through all the channels he can do, and he not only does he not continue the fight, but he's a great friend. If you ever get a chance to meet him, he will be there for you, he will help you, he will teach you, and he was our leader at the Gardena Post. He held meetings for our PTSD veterans that came in from all generations of combat. And I would just like to give a big round of applause, like I said, to someone who I hold dear to my heart, and I know the veterans do too, Mr. Jason Young.
Okay. Well, here I am. And what a beautiful sight you are. Just to see people who are taking a moment out of their lives, out of their busy days to come out and say, hey, I had somebody in my family, a loved one or whatever, that died 70 years ago, but I still remember that person. That's what this day is about. So before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge and say thank you to all of our elected officials. We see them quite frequently doing what they are elected to do, stand up for us, especially us veterans. They're there. Now we hear a lot of things and are going on, and people are saying a lot of things that sometimes we don't quite understand all of the nuances and what. But that's why we have elected officials. They're the ones that has to do all of the hard work, the homework, so to speak, to get in between the lines, to make sure that we, their constituents, are getting the right message. It is a complicated situation when you're dealing with politics and those kinds of things, but when I cast my vote, I'm telling that elected officials, look, make it easy on me. I'm not a politician. You are. Do your homework. Keep us informed. Support us. And especially for the veterans community, for which this day has been set aside. I don't want to call it a holy day, but it's a very, very special day. It is a special day because it has been set aside for you to do something for you. When you remember someone, when you recollect, when you have the time or take the time to say thank you, that is something that helps you as much as those around you, because it makes you a better person. When you recognize the veterans, the ones who have given their lives, made the ultimate sacrifices in ways that many of you cannot even imagine, then you are doing something great, not only for that veteran who lost their lives, but you're doing something great for yourself and for this great country. Thank you. So, I want to thank you for being here today, and I'm deeply honored to stand with you, commemorating the sacrifices of those military men and women who have laid down their lives in service to this nation. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge any who have lost loved ones during their time on active duty for this nation, who have lost their lives. It doesn't matter how long ago the loved one or the person you know passed away. It doesn't matter, because no words of condolences can ever begin to adequately console a survivor's grief. And while grief from loss may change throughout the years, the thought, the feelings, the emotions never leave us. There's a thing about this idea of closure. When people talk about closure, get over it. They really want you to forget. I mean, really what that word indicates is to forget. Closure. No, 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 no. It just does not happen that way in real life. You can go on with your life and do the things that you have a responsibility to do, but closure, forget about that. Because we're going to make sure you don't forget about that, because the last Monday in May, we're going to remind you that that door that you closed needs to be reopened. You need to think about that loved one, that friend that lost their lives in service to this country. So Before we go further, let's just take a moment of silence and remember those who have lost their lives in combat to this country. Thank you. Okay, as I said, last Monday, we find ourselves reflecting on men and women who have so bravely risked lives, limbs, and faced grievous danger. We remember those who left the comfort of their homes to fight in defense of this country, but never returned. On the day the little soldier, sailor, airman, Coast Guard, or Marines traded in that title for the one of veteran, that means that they are no longer with us. We mourn our brothers and sisters in arms the day they left us, and we mourn them now. The men and women who have given their lives in service to this nation are indisputably heroes. Now, we don't want to confuse that with that John Wayne mentality where you're going down shooting and all of this other thing. But you put that uniform on, you expose yourself and say, here I am. And if you could get it, take it. And you're willing to do that, you're a hero. That makes you a hero. So we don't ever want to forget that. Okay. Some volunteered to don the uniforms, and others were voluntold. Okay? Some were voluntold, meaning we were drafted. But no matter how we found our way into the ranks of the military, each took upon himself or herself to serve faithfully and to the fullest. This is commemorable in a nation where so few citizens have donned the uniform and accepted the inherent risk, and to this alone makes them heroes worthy of remembrance. For some veterans, we are unable to pay respects to a final resting place. There are still 82,000 plus military personnel missing in action from every conflict since World War II. No final resting place you can't go and do. We will never forget them, and we will never stop looking for them to bring them home. Almost every year, something or someone is returned to this country who was a casualty of war. Why is that? That's because we never forgot them and we never stopped looking. This past August, the ill-fated USS Independence was finally discovered more than 70 years after being torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. On July the 30th, 1945, the ship sunk in just 12 minutes. 12 minutes. There were more than 1,195 crew members aboard that vessel. Approximately 300 went down with the cruiser. The remaining sailors, Marines, faced exposure, dehydration, saltwater poisoning, delirium, and shark attacks. They survived. They didn't have adequate water, food, or life rafts for that matter. And they were out there trying to survive, trying to make it back. And then there was another predator that took many lives. Sharks. Can you imagine? How can you not set aside a minute or two or some time to recognize the men and women who lost their lives in such a heinous manner? So we must do this. The Navy didn't learn of this sinking of the ship that was spotted 4 days later by a freighter on a routine patrol. As a result, there were only 316 survivors, Marines and sailors, out of over 1,100 that made it to safety. Think about that. The families of those who lost loved ones on the USS Independent received a small sense of closure last year, but they are still a part of a club that no one asked to join. While service members and their families understand and accept the risks they take volunteer to serve this great nation, nothing can fully prepare a survivor for the shock, for that knock on your door. And it is just a war at sea and in air, or with boots on the ground of thousands of miles away, were lost service members. When that knock comes on your door, you talk to people who have lost loved ones, and they can tell you that that is the most shocking, soul-penetrating sound you could ever hear, because they know what is coming next. I think it's important to never forget the profession of arms is a dangerous job. Just last month, 3 aviation crashes in this 3 different states resulted in fatalities. 4 Marines, 2 sailors, and an Air Force Thunderbird pilot. Go Air Force. I know that each of you understand, or should understand, that this is just more than a passing news headline involving military personnel. This is a tragic loss of life, and we honor the following lives cut short in service. Of those 7, Captain Samuel Schwartz, Lieutenant Samuel Phillips, Gunnery Sergeant Richard Holly, Lance Corporal Taylor Conrad, Chief Warrant Officer 3 Ryan Connolly, Warrant Officer James Casada, and Major Stephen DeLabaggio. They lost their lives in crashes in different states here in this country. It's easy to say, oh, well, but they weren't in combat. They lost their lives in service to this nation. Those of us here today understand to recognize their services and sacrifices. We must ensure these individuals are never forgotten and that their actions still live in our memories and in our hearts. This is important to honoring the heroes of today and the veterans of years gone past, in past generations and past decades. There is a nationwide campaign underway to recognize veterans in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. The American Legion has played an active role in honoring veterans who served in the tumultuous time with an humble thanks for your grateful nation and paying the sacrifices in service. But there is nearly 60,000 people who will never receive the token of appreciation or of genuine thanks. As of Memorial Day last year, 58,318 names line the previously mentioned Vietnam Wall. We have a traveling wall that goes from states to state, and thank you so much to our dear Congresswoman. She makes sure it comes this way. So I hope you all, some of you all, at least had a chance to go out and view that. And there's an interesting story too about the Vietnam Wall. You know, in Washington, D.C., where the original monument stands, there is a rather spiritual aspect to approaching that wall. If you've ever been on that mall where it is, where that monument is, and you ask somebody, oh, where's the Vietnam Wall? Or they got to stand, they'll tell you it's right over here, it's over there, whatever. And you walk. Now, you know you're walking in the general direction of that wall. But it's not until you're right up on it that it comes into view. The way they got it laid out, and they got some little hills and whatever, so you don't see it plainly until you're right up on it. I don't want to get too far from the microphone. Okay? That in it of itself is almost enough to stop you in your tracks, because you know that what you're about to witness is something very, very spiritual. So even the approach to that wall represents something very, very special. On that wall, there's a few special people that I want to mention. One is a Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Graham, who served in the Army in World War II, Korea, and as the chief nurse in the 91st Evacuation Hospital in Vietnam. 3 wars now. What they call Vietnam a conflict, but as somebody who was there, I'm telling you, it was a war. Okay? Okay. She was 52 years old. And when she died after being evacuated to Japan, is buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Her name, again, Lieutenant Colonel Annie Ruth Graham. Another person who's very, very special, on that wall, is Private First Class James Anderson Jr. James Anderson Jr. became the first African-American U.S. Marine recipient of the Medal of Honor in 1967. He received the decoration posthumously after intentionally grabbing a grenade and absorbing the blast in order to save his comrade. I'm sure you've heard he or she jumped on a grenade. That's exactly what this soldier did. To save his people around him, his comrades. He took it, and he knew when he grabbed that grenade what was going to happen. But he also knew that through his actions, others of his comrades would survive, to live and fight on. Another name on the wall is Sergeant Robert G. Davidson. He joined the Marine Corps at age 14 and had 4 years of service in the military when he was shipped to Vietnam. He was killed in action on December 17, 1966, one day before his 19th birthday. 2 brothers, David and Norman Evans, were both killed in Vietnam. David was 19. He died on October the 24th, 1968, and Norman passed away just over 2 years later on November 1970 at age 23. They both served in the Army, died in separate helicopter crashes. Norman's body was never recovered as a result. And there's one other that I want to mention that is very special to me personally. His name is Thomas DeWitt Jones. Thomas DeWitt Jones and I were classmates in high school. Very witty, very smart, A student. You know, we were average, but everybody loved Thomas. We grew up together, went to church together, played together as kids. I joined the military. He went on off to college, which everybody knew that he was that kind of kid, you know, very witty, very smart. He went on off to college. Under some technicality, he wound up being drafted into the military service. And in 1970, He lost his life after only 3 months in country. I decided to develop something so that the people who lost their lives, who went to that high school named after George Washington Carver, located in Gadsden, Alabama, we undertook a project to recognize all of the people and develop a monument to recognize those people who went to that high school and was killed in combat. We have 11 so far. 1 World War II, 1 Korea, and the rest were Vietnam. But I was saying about Thomas, I didn't realize until, because I had gone to Washington, D.C., visited the monument, did the little rub-off thing for Thomas, because that was my buddy. We grew up together. I did not realize until we were putting together the information, the history, background history for the veterans, that the day Thomas was killed, I was also in country, less than 100 miles from where he died. I was shocked because, again, it comes back to you to say that, my God, you would never, he would be the last person to expect that to happen to him. So what I'm saying to you is this: find somebody. If you don't know somebody, go on the internet. They have all kinds of websites, and find somebody that you can, on this day, every year, say, thank you for your service. We can all do those kinds of things, but we must always remember that this is a special day that's been set aside for this purpose, and we must always let those who served in uniform, who wear this uniform, that they are appreciated, they are loved, and they are respected. Again, I thank you for having the opportunity to come here, and peace and blessings to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. So I guess we got all our dignitaries up. Ms. Maxine Waters, thank you again for everything. Mr. Stephen Bradford, thank you. Thank you, Assemblywoman Autumn Burke, and our mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really hard to follow that wonderful speech by Jason Young. We really thank you for coming and for sharing that with us. Thank you to all the dignitaries that are here, the elected officials. All of you gave very moving speeches, and I really thank you for coming. Would all the veterans please stand in the audience? In Hawthorne, we really recognize and appreciate and love our veterans. I'd like to recognize the new chair of the Veterans Affairs Commission, Ms. Kyle Orleman. Just want to mention something that we did this year in recognition of our appreciation for the service members in this community. So on March 13th, the city of Hawthorne entered a signing ceremony with the base, with the LA Air Force Base, to help make housing in Hawthorne available to the military members transitioning to the base. Because we know that housing is so difficult and expensive in the South Bay, we tried our best to find ways to give our service members right at the base a reason to want to stay in this region so that we can hopefully keep the base right here. The resolution approving the agreement was signed on February 27th by the City Council, and this MOU established the LA Air Force Base Housing Partnership Program that offers military members a list of participating a list of participating apartment managers right here in Hawthorne who will provide financial relief for housing costs and fees. So the city will agree, has agreed through this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to encourage all its landlords to participate in this program. Here are some ways that relief will be offered. The landlords will agree to waive security deposits and application fees. They will agree to structure rents according to military members' basic allowance for housing. They will agree to allow early termination of the lease when the military member is issued movement orders for deployment, separation, or permanent change of station. And we have enlisted the support of our Veterans Affairs Commission right here in Hawthorne. We established this commission 3 years ago, and we're very proud of what they're doing, so we gave them another job to do. They will make and keep a list of willing landlords in Hawthorne who are willing to participate in this program and connect those landlords with prospective tenants and provide that information to the base. So this will become a partnership between the city of Hawthorne and the LA Air Force Base, and we hope in that small way to do our part to help our service members on the base find affordable and attainable housing right here in Hawthorne. Thank you.
I feel bad. Have I forgot anybody else that wanted to come up and? Councilman Michelin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank all the federal, state, and local officials that came over here to pay the respects to Hawthorne veterans. You're here every year, so we appreciate it very much. Thank you very much for the Veterans Foreign War Hawthorne Post 2075, American Legion Hawthorne Post 314. You made this possible, and we appreciate all of your hard work on this. Special thanks to our Hawthorne Veterans Commission. We're one of the first or few cities with a Veterans Commission. They work very hard, so we'd like to thank them very much. But special thanks to the Hawthorne High Junior ROTC. I saw you out there. I was very impressed. I see the determination and the seriousness and the patriotism in your faces, and I know that our future is secure. So thank you very much. Today we're here to thank all the veterans that are present today, to the sacrifices that they made, the different wars that were fought, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, World War II. So thank you for making that sacrifice. But as Congresswoman Waters said, today is the day to honor those who have fallen. So special thanks to Mr. Jason Young to really bring it home and tell us what that's all about. Whether it was those heroes in those underwater graves or all his friends in the Vietnam Memorial, you really brought it home. A lot of friends were lost, a lot of families are grieving, and thank you for describing to us what that was all about. So thank you very much, and today we're all just gathered here to honor those fallen heroes and tell them thank you very much for everything you've done and given the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. As we described with the VFW, I want to give a shout out to Roger, the commander over at the VFW back there. He does a great job, and also with our veterans too. I don't think a lot of it can get done without the members of our SAL organization, which is Gilda Mills. He's the commander of the SALs, and of course our auxiliary units, right, which is Jean, is his wife, and she does so much for the movement of veterans, and she does so much for the advancement of veterans that we couldn't get it done without you. Thank you very much. Okay, at this time here, we will have our closing prayer by Clint Wheeler, chaplain of the American Legion.
Please uncover. Almighty God, Father of all mankind and Judge over nations, we pray Thee to bless this memorial service and to look down with favor and understanding upon the hearts of those who are gathered here to pay their tribute to those who have made the supreme sacrifice for the benefit of all free men everywhere. The lives of those who paid the supreme sacrifice are glorious before us. Their deeds bring a daily inspiration for those of us like ourselves who remain in their home communities. In God we trust, and may the faith of our fathers guide, protect, and sustain our people. Amen.
Amen.